Hello, visionaries. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Maresa Talbert. I am the founder and CEO of Talbert Law Office, your favorite go-to legal resource for all things business, nonprofit, and intellectual property law. So sometimes I bring you information I've learned as an attorney, and sometimes I bring you information I've learned as a business owner. And today, I'm giving you some of the gems that I've learned as a business owner, and it's what to know and what not to do when hiring remote workers. I learned the hard way, and I don't want you to make the same mistake. But before we get started, go ahead and click the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because I promise you, this is good. Okay, so obviously hiring remote workers can offer you many benefits. Sometimes you can gain access to a much broader talent pool, and a lot of times hiring remote workers can help you save on employment costs. However, this does come with very specific legal and practical risks. And I want to be clear, this is about hiring remote employees and not remote independent contractors. So here's what you need to know. Let's jump right into it. Number one, you need to have an employee contract. Now, who would I be if I didn't talk about the need for a contract? You know my saying, if it's not in writing, it does not exist. Your employee contract should discuss the duration of the employment, whether it's at will, whether it's 6 months, a year long, you get the point. It should also have the job title and the description of the duties and responsibilities of this job title. Your employee contract should also talk about the type of compensation that your employee will receive, whether that compensation is salary-based, hourly-based, commission-based, or some other type of basis. Your employee contract should also talk about whether this employee will handle confidential information and the obligation to maintain that confidentiality. And most importantly, your employee contract needs to have a dispute resolution clause that discusses how your employee can resolve legal disputes and the state where a legal dispute can be brought or handled. I will talk about this again later and explain why this is so important. Number two, you need an employee handbook. Now, an employee handbook is not the same as an employee contract or an employee agreement. These are two different things. And why do you need an employee handbook? Because you need to have clear policies about what your employee can and cannot do as a remote worker. Also, because there is this lack of in-person accountability, an employee handbook is extremely important. And it comes into play if there is ever a legal dispute. I'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute. Specifically, your remote employee needs to know certain things. What are the working hours? Is overtime authorized? Are employees expected to show up in some type of virtual setting, such as a Zoom call or a Microsoft Teams call? Does the video need to be turned on? Are they supposed to be dressed a certain way when they show up for those video calls? What are the communication protocols? Do you have an internal Slack channel? Is email appropriate? Is text message appropriate? Whether remote working opportunities are a right of the employee or a privilege that the company can give. If it's a privilege, how can that privilege be revoked? What are the tools, equipment, and software that remote employee needs to have in order to accomplish their job? Do they need stable internet connection? Most likely, yes. What can those tools and equipment be used for? For example, if you supply laptops for all of your employees, then you may specify that the laptop can only be used for work use and no personal use. These are the types of issues and policies that would go in an employee handbook that are not really appropriate for an employee agreement or an employment contract. Now, one of the most important policies that you need to have if you have remote workers is the requirement for any change of address to be updated within 30 days of the relocation. This is very important. I'll weave it all together and explain it in just a minute. But the point is, make sure that you have an employee handbook for your remote workers. It's very important. Number three, you must know that you are liable for workplace safety and ergonomics. If you are unfamiliar with the word ergonomics, it's basically just a description of how you design like desks and chairs and things in the workplace to make it easier and safer to use. So even though your workers are remote, and in many cases are working within their own homes, you as the employer are still liable if they hurt themselves while working. Ain't that something? So you must take part in ensuring that they have a safe working environment. This might include providing ergonomic assessments or other guidance to prevent workplace injuries. For example, you may offer guidance to all of your remote workers that every 2 hours they need to drink water and get up and stretch. That's some guidance that is going to help prevent workplace injuries. And you need to know that depending on the jurisdiction, remote workers are entitled to workers' compensation benefits if they are injured, yes, even in their own home, while working on the job. You heard what I said. This is required by law in most states. So if you're hiring employees, you are required to have workers' comp insurance, and that remote worker can make a claim on that workers' compensation insurance and get those benefits if they're injured while working, even in their home. All right, number 4. You need to have a working knowledge of the employment laws in the states where your remote workers live or work. Employment laws differ significantly by state and by country, and in most instances, remote workers are going to work across geographical areas, both nationally and internationally. Which means if you have workers working in states outside of the state where your business is located or registered, then you need to understand the employment laws of that state. You will be held liable to the wage and hour laws, the overtime requirements, benefit and entitlement requirements of the state or the country where the remote worker is located. Just beware. All right, number 5. Make sure that you protect your intellectual property. Make sure that your employee contract, not the handbook, but the contract, clearly states that any intellectual property created by your remote worker during their employment belongs to the company. Now, I've talked about this before. Roll the clip. Copyright law states that a person who creates the work owns the copyright. Did you hear what I said? I said, the person who creates the work owns the copyright. So think about how many times you've hired a person to do work for you. A work that may be protected by copyright law. If the person who creates the work owns the copyright and you didn't create the work, you don't own it. So how do we fix this? One way to fix this is through the work made for hire clause. So now back to our original question. What is a work made for hire? A work made for hire clause is a provision in a contract that states that an employer owns the copyrighted work even if it was created by the employee. For example, a chef creates a new recipe at the restaurant that he works at. Who owns the recipe? The restaurant. Or a software engineer creates a new program at his firm. Who owns the program? The firm. Or maybe a college professor creates a unique training to teach their students. Who generally owns the training? Under this example, the university. Under the work made for hire concept, the employer or the hiring person will generally own the copyright unless there's a written agreement that states otherwise. I'm going to say it every time. Get your contracts in order. If you need an employee agreement contract, you can get one from the TLO Marketplace. Just go to the TLO Marketplace, click on Employment Agreement, purchase, immediately download, and fill in the blanks. That's it. That's all. Number 6, let's talk about legal dispute. Now, remember when I said you need to have a dispute resolution clause in your employee contract? If you forgot, let's rewind. And most importantly, your employee contract needs to have a dispute resolution clause that discusses how your employee can resolve legal disputes and the state where a legal dispute can be brought or handled. Here is why that is so important. In a case of legal disputes, determining the applicable law and the jurisdiction can be very complex when you have remote workers working across different geographical areas or different states. For example, if you have a business in Texas, but you have a remote worker in Kansas, then a legal dispute can be brought either in Texas or Kansas, depending on the situation. But if you include the dispute resolution clause in your employee agreement, then you narrow down where you can be brought to court. So your employee agreement can say, all disputes are subject to the jurisdiction of Texas or are governed by the laws of Texas. And then you can mitigate the risk of being brought in places where you really don't want to fly to and spend money to be in a trial for days on end in some state where you don't really live or exist. Did I already say get your contracts in order? Am I making the point of how important contracts are? Did I tell you you could go to the TLO marketplace and get your employee agreement like today, right now? I hope I'm making this easy for you. I don't know, but I hope so. Number 7, let's talk about taxes. Tax compliance. Here's where it gets good, y'all. This is where I messed up, y'all. I did as a business owner. So I'm telling you so you don't make the same mistake. Okay? Now, I mentioned earlier, make sure that you have in your employee handbook, different from the contract, to require your employees, especially if they're remote workers, to update their change of address within 30 days of relocating. Why did I say that? Because you will be required to withhold taxes based on that employee's location. And failing to do so can result in fines and legal issues. I told you this happened to me. This happened to me, y'all. My remote employee lived in one state and moved to another state, but did not update her address until a year later, effective the year before. So for example, in her employee profile, which is connected to payroll, this employee, for example, stated, I moved from this date to this date, July 2024, effective July 2023. So I had to go amend all my tax filings from 2023, register as an employer with the new state's employment agency, file all the back payroll forms for that year from the day that she had actually moved, correct a year's worth of tax filings that were filed in the wrong state, and then had to refile the correct ones for the new state, had to pay penalties, had to pay new taxes, all the things. It just a mess, okay? A mess. And so what that means is that you have to register as an employer in every state where your remote workers live, because that's where they will file their taxes. And you have to pay payroll to that state and unemployment insurance and all the other things. If you are not aware of when your employees move from one state to another or even country, you're going to be held liable for failing to comply with the law. And it may not even be your fault. Additionally, if you have remote workers that work in other countries, their presence might create a permanent establishment for your company. And you may be liable for corporate tax liabilities in that country as well. So I wanted to put you up on game because this was a painful process to endure. Last but not least, number 8, take practical steps to mitigate risks. Remember to provide regular training for your remote workers and all of your employees on company policies. Keep detailed records of employment contracts, communications, and any changes to work conditions or policies within the company. Don't be afraid to regularly consult with legal or accounting professionals to ensure that you're in compliance with local, state, and international laws regarding your business based on where your employees are located. All right, that's all I have for this video. I'm telling you what I know because it happened to me. And for that alone, you should give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share with a friend. And don't forget to visit the TLO Marketplace. Go ahead, grab your employment contract today so you're not missing out. And as always, this is Talbert Law Office, your favorite go-to legal resource for all things business, nonprofit, and intellectual property law. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.